pique their interest goes is to do a stage in a restaurant. So I'm sure any of these chefs here would be happy to let your son come in and peel potatoes for free in exchange for having him get a sense of what it's like in a professional.
Anytime. Anytime.
Yep.
Perfect.
Well, I wanted to share a couple of things with you all. The first is, and I alluded to it a little earlier on, but I just wanted to talk about, not that this is anything, I think in addition to not having mangoes up in Prince George, I think it's pretty safe to say there are no cactus trees growing. But as I said, this crazy cactus paddle, this is it's a baby paddle. And it's called nopales. I mean, it comes off this big cactus tree, and each of the paddles is about this big when it's fully grown. But they sprout off when they're this size, and when they sprout off and start to form, this is like a little baby cactus paddle. And if you pick them, and the bricks are actually a little bit soft right now, but in like this. And this, when you slice it, is fantastic in salads. Also, it's great in tacos and quesadillas in place of meat, and it's a really beautiful flavor and texture. And I would say that probably closest to a fiddlehead if I had to describe what it was like taste-wise. Anyways, so that's what I've been doing. When times get tough here, I go out in my backyard and I cook my cactus. And I did want to show you one other little recipe, and I'm just gonna adjust my computer so I can show this. And this is a great thing to make if for anybody who has a pantry that's kind of being challenged and they're running out of ingredients. You want to make something like a pesto. So pesto traditionally has pine nuts and Parmesan cheese, basil, olive oil, and garlic. And so when you have none of those in that true form, in their pristine form, there's a whole other approach you can use when making pesto. So instead of basil, I like to use all the greens that I have. As you can see here, I'm just slipping right into my old demo routine. I thought it's fun. It's a fun thing to make, and the truth is, compared to a jarred pesto, this what I think of as garbage pesto because it's just things that you can really throw out. It's actually tastier. So you take any greens that you have. Got some celery tops. Actually got some a little bit of the last bit of cilantro, mostly stem, but I'm going to use that. Some prawns. And this is actually great for restaurants because it honestly does taste better than most jarred pesto, and it's the same kind of stuff you put in a stock pot, really. So there's my greens. For peanuts, instead of pine nuts, I'm using just the dregs of some peanut butter, just the last little bit from a jar. That's ground peanuts, right? So it's the same as a nut. And also, I don't know if any of you have watched any of the master class, but Massimo Bottura was talking about using breadcrumbs in place of pine nuts for his pesto, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm just going to throw in a few breadcrumbs while I'm at it. And there's another thing that we tend to throw out all the time: garlic. It's sprouting garlic. You can actually there's more sprout than there is garlic in this. But I'm just going to grab a knife, smash these down, add them in. All out of fancy Parmesan, but I happen to have a couple of Parmesan rinds that I've been saving. So hang on. I'm going to take these and grate them down to the point where I really have to be protecting my knuckles. But I get enough here to make this all work. It's kind of like a Freegan pesto, if you will. And then last up for olive oil, you've run out of olive oil. Here's something that in the old days when I had something, this is mozzarella cheese that's marinated in oil. or sometimes you have sun-dried tomatoes or whatnot in oil, you tend to get to the bottom of it and there's just like a quarter inch of the oil left, and you tend to just throw it out with the jar. But the truth is that oil is perfectly fine oil. Add that in, and inappropriate implement to taste it. Nothing tastes better than free. That's what I say. Damn, that was good. All right. That was over my 60-second allotment. Norm, are you there?
I am here. You know what? This has been so great, man. I'm honestly like, thank you guys all for tuning in and being a part of this. And Bob, I can't convey how grateful we are to have you on board for.
Dude, I'm just happy. I'm happy to see some of my old friends since I was looking forward to seeing them all on this very weekend. So I'm thanking you. You don't need to thank me.
I appreciate it. For anybody who's tuning in, obviously, like we're doing these to keep the community connected. Every one of these streams is free, but we are encouraging donations for all the other streams except for this one. The donations go to United Way. For this particular stream, all donations are going to hospice, which is it's not going to be as big as it would have been had we had our event, but it's something. So thank you so much. Also, every stream is being sponsored product-wise by some of our beer friends. Oh, here I am looking at the camera again. Hey, I'm looking at the camera. So Trench Brewing is the product sponsor for this particular stream. It didn't seem too smart of me to crack a beer at 10 a.m., but as soon as 11 hits, I'll open that puppy. Man, thanks so much, everybody, for being here today.
Yeah, and taking your time, because I know, I mean, you're busier than ever, so it's much appreciated. And by the way, looking forward to coming up whenever we resurrect this baby and get that competition back on the schedule.
1,000%.
I just want to encourage everyone to get out, take out, support our restaurants. We really want to make sure that they're here with us when we open the door and we're back out. So please try out all these restaurants, phone them up, take them out. It's also a great way just to reconnect with your own family and take a day off of cooking. So please support them all.
Absolutely.
For sure. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bob.
Bye.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi, Jagdish.
Hi.
Look at this. Here we are in the home of the Cougars. Didn't do quite as well as we wanted them to do, but did better than we expected. And next year's the beginning of everything, don't you think? Cougars. No, we need more enthusiasm than that. Cougars. Now you're talking.
I got to go and visit the mall here, Pine Center Mall. Got a nice little gift card from the
everybody today.
This better be an HD, man. I mean, I'm working on it. I gotta work on it.
Full HD. It doesn't get much more HD than this. Yeah. He doesn't know that I'm actually following my own.
Very nice. You're a stormtrooper. Profile. Watch it out. Overarm. Nice. Nice.
I would like to go home now.
There is a place we can rest our heads tonight. It's the second most haunted place in Barkerville, the St. George Hotel.
So not home?
No, hotel.
Hotel. Haunted hotel.
Yes, haunted hotel.
Haunted hotel.
All right, this way.
On the count of three, I want the loudest FanCon scream you can do. 1, 2, 3! All right, let 'em in!
How having grown up reading comics and watching movies and all that kind of stuff, that almost makes me feel like the fantastic is possible. Northern FanCon was started in 2015, and it was born of my desire to bring something grand scale to this city. I'm the event manager for the Prince George Citizen, which is a newspaper that is over 100 years old. I started doing events 3 years ago after I had a lot of success with an arts and entertainment magazine that I created called the Scene PG magazine. I went to Calgary Expo and I was like, man, it would be so awesome if we could actually do something like this in Prince George. We started doing sort of micro events, and we started with Kim Coates, who was from Sons of Anarchy. And then after that, we'd established enough of a relationship with one of the agencies, and that was William Shatner's agency. Once we confirmed William Shatner, we announced him, it blew up. Hey, what time are you gonna be on site? Putting it all together that first time, the event was much harder than I would have anticipated. It was 60 booths, 2 arenas, 12 guests, and I thought that was a huge accomplishment. We then tripled in size. Now we're in 4 arenas, we're over 180 exhibitors, and we have 20 guests this year. Once you open the doors, it's got a life of its own. The energy is so unbelievable, and everybody's so excited and so happy, and that's where they want to be. And it's like you're creating moments for these people. And that's kind of what keeps me going on it. The Awakenings booth, I'll show you where it is. When I'm on the floor, I like to make my rounds, and I like to actually check in with each of the artists, each of the exhibitors, each of the guests, so that they know like we're all partners in this great experience, right? So that's really important to me. This is cool. You got like such a great booth. This kind of event is just so awesome because it is that range of like the young to the old. Yeah, I think it speaks to like sort of the universal appeal to all this stuff. Right? It's not just an escape. It's something that you can actually get into and you can feel, and it's something more. Prince George is my hometown. This is where my heart is. Prince George is known for paper and pulp mills, but it's so much more than that. I think that the things that we're doing, it's going to change that perception. We're bringing all these great, amazing things to town, and we're going to get recognized for a few of those things as well. It's very, very kind of community-centric. It's super friendly and welcoming. I have a few places around town that are just my very favorites. One of them is Nancio's, which is like an old Irish pub, and I absolutely adore the fact that you go in and you're greeted by people, and it's very warm and it's very welcoming, and the atmosphere is just unbelievable. Hey, buddy. How's it going? Good. How are you doing? I think we should have a lot of pride in where we live. We all build a community together, and if everybody's invested in it, then we have an amazing community like Prince George. I love it here. I think everything is so great. All the people are amazing. You know, it's beautiful here, and I want everybody who's out there to come and experience it and take a piece of it with them. I wasn't going to be told that we're not big enough or we're not cool enough. We are big enough, and we are cool enough, and we are going to keep doing these things, and they're going to be amazing.
everybody today.
Hey, this better be an HD, man. I mean, I work hard. I gotta work hard.
Full HD. It doesn't get much more HD than this. Yeah. He doesn't know that I'm actually following my own.
You're a stormtrooper.
Watch it out. Overarm. Nice, nice.
I would like to go home now.
There is a place we can rest our heads tonight. It's the second most haunted place in Barkerville, the St. George Hotel.
So not home?
No, hotel.
Hotel. Haunted hotel.
Yes, haunted hotel.
Haunted hotel.
All right, this way.
all I'm trying to do is get it as smooth, with that elasticity, and feel for when it starts to get combined enough. And those ratios I did are like the perfect. You do essentially 3 to 1 when you're doing peasant dough.
Yeah? You call it peasant dough?
Peasant dough. The reason why I call it peasant dough is because in places like Orchetti Alley and things like that in Italy, they couldn't afford eggs and things like that. So a lot of them they did peasant dough, which is basically water, semolina. And you'll find in Italy, there's all these places that are just like whole alleys of just nonnas or grandmas just making one type of pasta. This is one of the easiest ones, and one of my favorites for just making at home. You know, if it's really humid at home, your flour might not use much water. And see how it's starting to get nice and smooth? Just about that protein going. That's what makes it a noodle. If I just combined it, just a really shitty cracker. I'm basically waiting to feel that spring, you know? See, it's almost smoothed itself back out. I'll go a little bit more. I'm just doing like a little simple half fold and a push forward. Just cover it. Damp towel, 15 minutes. Alright, so the dough's been resting for about 30 minutes. And you can start to see the difference from that spring, how much softer that is.
So you don't want it to spring back up?
No, that's what the whole point of resting is. You're trying to relax all the protein and everything else in there. A little more of your semolina flour mix from Anita's. What we're trying to do essentially is make a nice little snake. It's a fun thing to do. That's why so many families, like, it becomes like a family recipe. Your family makes orchetti, your family makes cavatelli, your family makes gnocchietti. So you're kind of cutting into these little pillow shapes, which is kind of similar to what you see when you make like gnocchi.
Yeah.
Well, this is a cavatelli board, or probably a garganelli board.
Right.
We're not making garganelli, we're just using the wood for the shape. You can do this on any wood board, a sushi mat. I like the little rips, the ripples in there. I think it makes the sauce stick to it better. So what you're trying to do, you're gonna grab the cut side, push your thumb into it, press it, and then just let it roll, release. I'll edit that one out, because unfortunately I didn't flour the board enough. You have a nice floured cavatelli board, or garganelli board. Press your pillow into it, grab the cut side, and there you go.
There you are.
And that's how you make.
Oh, that could really hold on to some sauce.
Oh yeah. So like, if you don't have one of these, I'll show you a couple things on just a normal wood table. Honestly, use a sushi mat. Sushi mat, everyone has one of those at home, hopefully. Same thing, get a little flour on your board. Just keep the grains from being filled up. And there's two ways to do it now if you're just doing on a wood board. You can do your thumb again, which as you see, still has that nice kind of hole throughout it, little shape. A lot of people do this, the two fingers. They'll stretch it towards themselves. So like I said, cavatellis, you could do it without the beautiful rivets.
Rivets look better though.
The rivets look way better. That's more like, that's kind of a sign of more of an affluent kind of family. Okay, you can see how like this is, you do an afternoon making this, you have pasta for the next couple weeks. And when this time I'll show you how to do orchetti. It's another peasant dough. Uses a very different kind of shape though. And with these you can freeze them, and it holds great. You can cook it from frozen, or you can dry it for a good half an hour and then put it in a bag and let it sit in your fridge for about 5 to 7 days. This is definitely an easy way to make delicious pasta that looks unique. And I haven't seen too much cavatelli for sale in stores. Beef footage, or if you actually want to.
I have B-roll.
Yeah, B-roll's always good.
Sometimes it gets compressed, like jump it up by like 100% the speed. Look how fast he's going.
So our water is at a nice boil. I'm just gonna take our cavatelli we made before. I'm gonna give it a little shake off, get all the excess flour off. If you don't, your pasta water is gonna boil over, and it'll be a little gummy when you actually go to use it. You don't want too much flour in your water, because starch water, pasta water, big part of our pasta sauce here. All right, since this is fresh pasta, this should take about a minute to 2 minutes.
Yeah, fresh pasta takes a lot less.
Now, normally on the restaurant situation, I have 2 burners going. I'll have my carbonara going as soon as I drop this. I only have the one available right now, so we're going to do it just in stages. Also makes it kind of easier. Get our pasta boiled to as al dente as fresh pasta can get. It's a little more, not as toothsome as dry pasta.
Right.
Which is why a lot of people actually prefer dry for carbonara. That's why I like the cavatelli if I'm doing it with the fresh noodle versus fresh spaghetti or bucatini. Because when you use fresh of those noodles, there's not a whole lot of bite to it. Carbonara needs texture. architecture. We'll check this in about a minute. Yeah, so my goal for the pasta water is always, should have said this earlier, I want to taste like the ocean. Salty as can be, because when you're doing fresh peasant dough, you add very little salt to the dough itself.
Right.
All that seasoning should come in this. If you put too much salt in the dough, I find it makes it too tough, personally. But you salt the water, it's flavored, it's tasty, it's delicious. A good seasoned pasta water, you should be able to take the water, take some black pepper, take a little cheese, and you've got cacio e pepe, which is a delicious sauce. Right?
I want to make cacio e pepe.
We can do that. So I'm just gonna splash a little bit of olive oil on here, keep it from gluing together.
Whoa, here we go. We're getting everybody today.
This better be
full HD. It doesn't get much more HD than this. Yeah. He doesn't know that I'm actually following my own.
Very nice. We're doing Stormtrooper. Profile. Touch it out. Overall. Nice. Nice.
Dude. Hey. I know why. I figured out the Jason David Frank issue. I copy and pasted the Jason David Frank email, took his name off of it, just like for the link bit, because that's the last email that I saw. And so they were all
Traveler's Wife, The Rocker, Wonder Falls, Covert Affairs, Warehouse 13, The Dresden Files, Orphan, Lucifer, Death Note, The Predator, The Boys, Riverdale, WandaVision, Resident Evil 2, Silent Hill 2, Deadpool 2, Game of Thrones, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yes, all of the above.
Exactly.
It sounds pretty good when you say it out loud like that. I like it.
Exactly. Just got to run it over real quickly. And I'll say to everybody, and I get this thing here, that these podcasts that we're doing, these interviews are brought to everyone by Trench Brewing. Yes, that's right, Trench Brewing. Brewed for adventure. Of all the beers in Prince George, Trench Brewing is absolutely in the top 5. Trench Brewing, when you want to get drunk but have a modicum of actual taste, once you're finished with your bottle of Bacardi White, crack open a can of Trench Brewing. Named after a ditch with a logo of mountains. Confused? So am I. Trench Brewing. Okay, get that out of the way. All right, so let's. I mean, obviously, we went through the whole history, but how did you get started? Like, what was your first job? How did you go back to your childhood drawing? Let's do the history of Sims here.
Well, I actually got started in my art career by going to college for music, as it turns out. I was spent 4 years at Humber College in Toronto as a jazz trombonist. So my career choices were super strong right out of the gate, as you can see. Anyways, while I was there, I did a music video. I did some storyboards for a music video for some friends of mine. And I've always been an artist since I was a kid. I did a little comic books when I was in high school and stuff like that. Chose the music path, but still art was in my blood. So I did that, and that sort of led to another little job. And then the cameraman from that did something else for another director, and then that led to my first job, actual job, which was a TV show called Witchblade, actually, which was on TNT for a couple of seasons. Yeah, it was based on a comic book. It was like I was like on the ground floor for doing comic book adaptation storyboards, as it turns out. Yeah, and that was like literally that was the first sort of real production that I ever worked with, and it was great. I went in and interviewed with the executive producer showrunner Ralph Hemaker, who is a fantastic guy, and we literally spent about 5 minutes flipping through my meager samples, and then another 45 minutes or so talking about comic books and stuff, and he immediately gave me the job. So that was good. So that was 2 years of working on that, and then basically sort of eking my way up through up the ladder as it goes, and working on sort of bigger and bigger projects.
So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it comics that you were working on, or was it storyboards were you working on first?
I was storyboards first. I mean, I always wanted to do comics. Like that was always sort of my goal when I was starting out to pursue art. Like comic books was my thing. So I was reading a lot of comics, and I was drawing a lot of sort of my own personal comics and stuff. And when storyboarding came up as an option, I was just like, oh, this is actually a decent way to keep drawing pictures for a living and actually make some money doing it. Because when you're breaking into the comic book industry, which I mean, technically I haven't really even done yet, if you want to get technical about it, there's not a lot of money when you first start out. You do a lot of drawing for free. So when storyboards came up, it was like, oh, this is good. I still get to draw. It's similar in the sequential sort of aspect of the nature of the art. And they were paying me more than my full-time job in a warehouse that I was doing at the time. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So 20 years later, and I'm still doing storyboards, and I actually have finally published my first comic work. So good.
So yeah, and what is the name of that series, and where can people find it?
Well, it's actually the first comic that I've printed that I've actually had published right now is called The Ables, and it's just a one shot that I did for my friend Jeremy Scott. Jeremy Scott is the voice and one of the writers for the CinemaSins channel, who do the Everything Wrong With videos.
Oh yeah, I know that guy.
You either love him or you hate him.
Oh yeah. There are some moments where I'm like, yeah, and then there's some moments where I'm like, no.
I love them. I think they're great. I think they're just for laughs, and that's all good. But Jeremy and I really developed a bond over Twitter, and so he and I are actually really good friends now. So when he signed a book deal with his publisher for a 4-book deal, we also worked into that deal that I would do a standalone comic book issue in between the first 2 books. So If you're interested in the Ables, that's what this art is from.
Great backdrop, by the way.
Thank you very much. These are my convention banners. So I did that. If you're interested, it's theables.com. You can find that at Turner Publishing. His third book is coming out this fall, and you can get the 3 books, and the standalone that I did in between also is available there. So.
Okay, so this is kind of a very, very broad question, which I'm sure is one of those things where, if when you're getting interviewed, that it's one of those questions where you're thinking, oh, really? But how does one do a storyboard? Like how does that process come about?
It is a very broad question, and it really it varies literally from show to show. So I can give you a couple of different examples in a couple of different ways that I personally like to work, or find myself working, anyways. So you have different types of directors. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know what storyboarding is and what a storyboard artist does, basically what I do is I draw pictures that represent what the filmmakers will shoot on the day that they're gonna shoot the film or TV series or whatever it is that I'm working on. So if I'm working on an episode of The Flash, for example, generally speaking, we'll take the visual effects shots or the stunt shots, and I will basically draw a comic book like roadmap of what the scene will look like, so that everybody can use it as reference on the day. Set up the cameras, understand how the stunts are going to work, that type of thing. So within that process, you have a couple of different styles of working. So if again, to use The Flash as an example, we've got 8 days to prep and 8 days to shoot. So it's a really streamlined process for a show like The Flash, where I go in, we do 2 or 3 scenes for the episode. A lot of the times the directors will actually come in with a detailed shot list. I want this, go away and draw that. And so I will, using my expertise in filmmaking and how to frame things and all of that stuff. I'll go away and I'll actually just draw the shot list as he or she has put it down. Basically with the script, we'll go through, we'll make the notes, and then I'll go home and I'll draw it. Another way that it goes, that it happens, is similar to that, where they'll have, I need this shot, but then the connective tissue that actually makes a TV show or a movie work, they'll leave up to me, so that there's a little bit of creativity involved in that on my end, and that I get to make up some shots. I get to, this doesn't really make sense, I'll need to put something in between to make it happen, that type of thing. And then the last section is basically like, here are the script pages. Go off, draw it from your own head, and we'll see what we like and what we don't like, and then there's like an editing process from that point.
So, does I assume there's a difference in processing between working on a movie and working on a TV show? Definitely,
and it's usually money and time, basically. So even within the realm of television, like working on Flash, for example, versus Game of Thrones, the Flash, like I said, 8 days of prep, 8 days to shoot for one episode. Game of Thrones does it differently. They block shoot everything, so everything that they have to shoot in Ireland for the entire season, they do all of the directors all at the same time for every episode. Then they move the whole production to Spain. But they also have a much longer lead-in time in the prep section. So, for example, I did for Game of Thrones, I did season 7, episode 4 and 5. Episode 4 was the one with the loot train sequence, which is basically the biggest sequence the show had done up until that point, where, spoiler alert, Jaime Lannister is bringing the loot that he got from the
I remember.
Yeah. And then the dragon comes in and destroys everything. So I got to storyboard that sequence, and the prep for that sequence alone took us about 8 weeks to do.
Wow.
So 8 days on Flash versus 8 weeks on Game of Thrones, and it's literally just time and money. Like that's like they've all allocated a lot more. They're only doing 10 episodes a year, so they divvy it up differently. And then I think they shot it in like 13 weeks or something like that. It was a crazy amount of time just for that one sequence.
Wow. So you're dealing with, you did 2 episodes of Game of Thrones in season 7. Does that mean, like, do you associate with other storyboard artists? Like, do you know who they are, or just like, there he is? Is there a sharing of information at all?
Not in that particular case. In other cases, yes. Game of Thrones specifically, I was brought onto that show by a director that I had worked with many times previously. So I'm sort of that director's name is Matt Shackman. I'm currently working on him with WandaVision as well. So basically, he and I started working together on Heroes Reborn. I guess about 5 years ago now.
Going back, yeah.
And so basically any job that he's done from that point, no matter where he was, that he needed storyboards for, I have done those storyboards for him. So when he got the call to do Game of Thrones, I also got the call for Game of Thrones. So it was kind of cool. Now Game of Thrones actually has their own regular guy over there, but he was conveniently busy doing other stuff for other directors. So it really was a good opportunity for me to come in and work that way. So Game of Thrones, not so much. If you want to talk about Deadpool 2, there's a situation where like literally 4 storyboard artists sitting in a room together, bouncing sequences and jokes off of each other because of the nature of the show and of the movie. It's all about what kind of gags can we throw in. So it was like literally like for 3 months of my life, like just laughing for 8 hours a day. It was pretty great.
Like so see, whenever I think of storyboards, there's you thinking of behind the scenes with certain movies. I see 2 examples pop up. One is Ridley Scott, who does a lot of his own storyboards.
Right.
And so obviously in a situation like that, the director is very much involved in the creation process. So have you been in those situations where sometimes the director's like, he gives you notes and you go off, and are there other times where a director sits down with you and you go stage by stage on each sequence? How much freedom do you sometimes get depending on the project?
Yeah, like I said, it really depends on the director and what the sort of the scale of the project. So like Deadpool 2, for example, was a situation where there was a lot of freedom towards the beginning of doing a sequence. So it was like we'd get what they call a beat sheet, where it's literally like this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. But all of that filler stuff that sort of is there to sort of flesh out the scene and make it into something that people actually want to watch was given to us. And then so as we did the sequence, as we worked on these individual sequences, every day at 5 o'clock, the director David Leitch would come in, and we'd have what we would call David Leitch's happy hour. And he would come in and basically go from artist to artist, and we would all go around and check out what we'd all been working on that day. And then as the sequences got further along towards completion, that's when the director really sort of started to focus us in to the things that he wanted and didn't want, and how to make it really into the scene that you're going to end up seeing on camera.
Being originally a stunt coordinator, does David Leitch's approach differ from other directors?
He was very into how to make the things that we were drawing work. So in that sense, yes. Like a lot of the times, the director will be like, "Oh, let's do this version, this sort of pie in the sky version," as it's been called, and then
throwing budget to the wind.
Yeah, and just sort of let the stunt guys figure it out. Now, there's always a bit of that the first time you go through it, right? They always want your best and biggest ideas. So that always is how you start. But he always had a mind of, that's great, but I'm not 100% sure that that's where our time and resources are best served. So let's try it from this different angle. So in that sense, yes, definitely.
See, I've actually flipped because one of the things you can also pick up from you is that you also have some of your storyboards in compilations that people can purchase. Right.
I do. Yeah, it's I've got some little booklets put together. I got, for example, one sequence from Deadpool 2 that is an extended version of the armored truck sequence that happened in the movie, and then I've also got some Game of Thrones stuff from the second episode that I did. So yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen those. So looking at those shots and seeing how closely they resemble the final shot, did you ever get like a personal like, that's my scene?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. We're going through for Game of Thrones is a great example of that, because Matt is a great director to work with, in that he always knows what he wants, but sometimes he doesn't know what he wants until I show it to him, if you know what I mean. So he comes in with a really clear idea, made it into the script. So I'm actually pretty happy about that. I'm
Oh,
a writer now.
that is cool, actually. Because usually you don't see a lot of dialogue within in those storyboards. Most of the time, it's
Yeah, I mean, storyboards with dialogue are generally just for the timing of it. Like, oh, this is the point at which this happens, so here's the dialogue for reference, right? But then I put this joke in, and part of the joke in the storyboards was dependent on this line of dialogue. So the dialogue made it into the script as well. So I'm pretty pleased about that.
Yeah. So with Deadpool 2, I mean, there's been some stories about how, say, Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese and Ryan Reynolds kind of approached it. Were they constantly on the fly? Were they kind of improvising? Did you deal with the writers at all, or were you always dealing with David?
No, I didn't. I didn't meet the writers at all, actually. So I was mostly dealing with David for the most part. I met Ryan once, which was very cool. He's a super nice guy. But as far as the writing goes, I think that their process is really about putting words down on the page and then trying to, while keeping the tone of the words and keeping the important words. I think also allowing Ryan to sort of just go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you ever worked in a project where it was a writer director, or has there always been situations where the writer and director were different people? Because sometimes I've noticed with writer directors, they got a specific vision in their mind, and so it becomes more about articulating what they pictured in their head.
Yeah, I can't think of a situation where I actually have. The closest that I would say that I'm working on right now is actually in Doctor Strange, is that the writers are actually pretty involved in the whole process. So I obviously can't talk about that very much, but I will say that one is the most collaborative situation that I've been in, where like literally everybody is involved, which is actually pretty cool way to do it. So
okay, so I'm gonna skirt around the whole I can't talk about it much thing about that, but I'm gonna skirt around it. I'm gonna poke and prod until I can figure where the borders are. Were you brought on the project before or after the director left?
I was brought on by Scott Derrickson.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Had you worked with him before?
I had, yeah. That's an interesting story, actually.
Okay.
So I liked Doctor Strange a lot. The first one was very cool. And when I guess it was like later that year or the following year or something, in Vancouver here, a pilot was brought to town for Snowpiercer, which is based on the movie Snowpiercer. And now
Good movie.
And the series is happening on TNT, I think, or I can't remember exactly where. Anyway, Scott Derrickson was brought in to do the pilot for that, and I was just like, well, I mean, I loved Doctor Strange, so I'm gonna contact the production and basically see if they need any storyboards. So I literally sent an email and said, hey, I'm a storyboard artist in town. I'd love to work on your show if you have anything available. And they did. So they brought me in, and I got to work with Scott for about a month or so on that. And I think we had a really good working relationship. And so when he got announced for Doctor Strange 2, I dropped him an email. I was like, hey, Scott, we worked together on Snowpiercer. I really enjoyed working with you. I hope that things are going well. And if you need any storyboards done for Doctor Strange 2, feel free to hit me up. And I was currently working on WandaVision at the time for Matt. And I guess it was about a week later, I got a message from Matt saying, oh, by the way, my people are talking to Scott's people, and we're talking about how to get you onto Doctor Strange after you're done on WandaVision. So I literally finished up my work for Matt on WandaVision, and immediately the next Monday started on Doctor Strange with Scott. So thank you, Scott Derrickson. That's all I have to say about that.
So was there a process of transition to when Sam Raimi came on board? Have you talked with Sam?
Yeah, I can't really talk too much about that. What I will say is that the translation for myself and for the rest of the storyboard artists that I'm aware of went very smoothly, and that I have, on the one hand, while I am sad that I'm missing out on the opportunity to work with Scott again, and I'm hoping to do so again in the future. The transition to working with Sam Raimi has been really pleasant for me. I've really been enjoying it.
Because Sam is he's got a very unique vision.
Sam is great. He's got ideas, and he knows how to express them, and he's very welcoming to people bringing ideas to the table, which is great. I can tell you right now, I'm hoping that there's a couple of big sequences that I've had a real creative hand in that will be making it into the final cut of the movie. I'm super excited about continuing to flesh out that process as we move forward. So
now that you're entrenched in the Disney verse with the WandaVision, You know, you started off with now with Doctor Strange and WandaVision. Is the Disney atmosphere different than outside of it with other projects like out of Vancouver or whatever?
It's funny because it's really like for what I've been working on. I mean, you say the Disney thing, and while that is the larger umbrella,
Or
it
Marvel,
really is
Marvel
the
specifically.
Marvel,
Then,
the
yeah,
Marvel thing is a very specific way of working that I'm finding to be quite different from any way that I've worked before. Actually, yeah, it's very collaborative. It's extremely like I've been in situations as a storyboard artist where I haven't felt the where I haven't really felt the confidence in my position in the production to really open my mouth at some points. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea, or I don't know, I'm not so sure about that, or what about this? Excuse me. Whereas in this particular working environment, very much they are open to everybody basically having at least to say. Whether they go with it or not is another thing. But of course, you're always welcome to open up. So the collaboration is really the key to making these movies, I think.
yeah. And you can't give us a little tease about your work on WandaVision, I guess, eh?
Not a bit, no. no, not even a tiny little bit.
But yeah, I guess we'll all see. I guess after it comes out, then I can talk to you again. You're like, okay, you know that part here, that was me.
I would, yeah, absolutely. Like once it's all out there and everybody can see it, I'm sure I can. I mean, nobody cares if you start talking about things, as long as you're not telling tales out of school or anything. But yeah, I'll be able to speak more specifically about my work, I think.
Is that non-disclosure going to be? Is that uniform across the industry? Or are there some situations where they're like, we don't care what you talk about, or is Marvel especially tight-lipped?
Marvel is especially tight-lipped. Yeah, I mean, I can say that I'm working on it. I can say certain things about how I'm enjoying working on it, but really that's about it. Like I can't tell you anything about the shows, no details whatsoever about that. I mean, obviously I know some things, but
well, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't even allude to the things that I might know. Yeah.
not even a surreptitious wink.
Not even, no.
So, by the way, so do you work entirely on analog, or do you employ digital in your storyboards?
I'm completely digital.
Completely digital.
Yeah, I don't work on paper anymore at all.
Yeah. Was there a point where you did?
Yeah, it was about. It was actually right before I moved to Vancouver. Actually, I bought my first Cintiq tablet secondhand from one of the people in the art department on a show I was working on. Actually, so yeah.
So it's Cintiq you employ?
That's what I was working on then. Yeah, I bought a secondhand Cintiq 13-inch attached to my laptop and everything. From that, I moved on to a Wacom Mobile Studio Pro 16, which is sort of more all-encompassing and sort of all self-contained.
Is that the one with the screen built into it?
Yes, screen's built in. It's a 4K resolution display. It's super great, and it's portable with like 6 hours of battery. I mean, I can't recommend that unit highly enough. So that's what I use. I used that for about 5 years, and then now I've got myself a new desktop unit. It's a Lenovo A940 Yoga touchscreen thing. It's about this big and it's huge, and it tilts and it comes up, and that's what I'm on right now. So
yeah, because obviously, I mean, I publish books for a living, so I deal with artists all the time, and it's interesting seeing the vast majority of these different styles. Like the artist I employ most, he employs a combination. Like he draws a sketch and then he'll scan it in, and then I see his tablet. His Wacom tablet is this little tiny thing, like this big.
It's funny when you start doing storyboards. Like I mean, the first tablet that I used like wasn't really much bigger than my phone. Like I mean, the drawing surface on it when you're doing storyboards doesn't need to be that much bigger than that, really. But I mean, as I started to get more into doing my own personal comic book stuff, also the graphic novel that I'm doing with Kevin Smith, just dropped that subtly.
Don't worry, that was next on the docket. Like right, literally. It's...
All right, cool. I wanted to start working on a larger surface and a larger scale because comic pages are slightly larger than storyboards and stuff like that. So yeah, the bigger the better. I like it.
Yeah. So yeah, the Kevin Smith project. Let's talk about that for a bit because I think the last time you were in Prince George, we were talking about that.
Yeah, this has been it's interesting. The Kevin Smith graphic novel based on his TV scripts for Hit Somebody, which is a decades spanning hockey-centric Canadian love story, right out just like typical Kevin Smith stuff. And yeah, it's basically been like, as far as like Kevin's concerned, it's just like, yeah, just sort of target of opportunity. If you're busy, you're busy, but when you have time to work on it, please work on it. And so it's been super cool because I've got 54 pages. The first book is done from my end, anyways. It's going to be 8 books, so it's still quite a ways to go. But I managed to, like, the more that I've done it, also the more I've been able to sort of work on it more efficiently. So I'm really making some good progress on it now, and I'm hoping to get the whole thing out within the next couple of years.
I thought at one point it was supposed to be a musical.
Not that I know of. I don't know.
Heard, well, I think originally when he first designed it, it was going to be a 2-movie musical.
Oh wow!
And then it was going to be a 2-movie deal, and then it became a TV show and so forth.
Yeah.
So will this encompass the entire story, or is this a lead up of a continuing series?
This is the whole thing. So basically, he restructured it as 8 episodes of television. So basically, I've got those 8 episodes of television in script form, and I'm taking each one and adapting it into 1 volume of the book. So the first episode of Hit Somebody, the TV show, is now the first issue of Hit Somebody, the comic book graphic novel.
Oh, wicked. Yeah. The other project, I mentioned Ridley Scott with Dune. The other project that when it comes to storyboarding, I was really passionate about, and it may tap you for more your geek knowledge, but have you seen Jodorowsky's Dune?
I have, yes.
Now, what do you think? Like, that is probably the king daddy of storyboard artists, because that book has 1,000 pages.
Yeah,
with Mobius doing all of the storyboard artists, and the intervening color images by Chris Foss and H.R. Giger.
Yeah, I would love to get my hands on that and just like lose myself in it for I don't even know how long. It's amazing. Like the lengths to which the groundwork and the foundation of that movie, potentially anyways, was laid was absolutely astounding. I mean, I would love to see that material firsthand.
Yeah, supposedly there's only like 1 or 2 copies of that storyboard book that Jodorowsky has in possession. So you imagine that book is $1 million to make that.
Probably, right? Like, I mean, yeah, they mentioned that in the movie, didn't they? In the documentary, that there's like there's 2 of these now, and that's I would love to get my hands on them. But
yeah, because I know that you can find Chris Foss's and H.R. Giger's work. I follow both of them. I actually talk with Chris Foss. And you can find their work online, but the Mobius stuff, there was so much from Mobius, all the storyboards. Some of those are only found in that book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the holy grail of storyboard artist stuff, really. Like it's the lost ark. You know, you open it up and your face melts because it's so brilliant and epiphanous, if that's a word.
Oh yeah. Do you have a personal favorite project? Is there, like, when you get a call to work on a TV show, is there a certain one? I know it's like you can't play favorites. Oh no. There's only a few people. You can play favorites just for a second. Is there one?
I mean, Game of Thrones was obviously a big one. I mean, I was a huge Game of Thrones fan when I got that call, and to be involved in such a massive, like the scale of that particular sequence, the loot train sequence on Game of Thrones, was just like nobody had ever seen that on TV at that point. You know what I mean? So. I mean, that's obviously a personal favorite. Deadpool 2 was great too, just because, again, it was a situation where I got to see a lot of the creativity from my own head actually end up on the screen. So that was cool. I mean, ultimately, I'm just sort of like, I'm pursuing these projects now, one sort of after another, that I'm really just kind of getting more and more excited about. So, I mean, Game of Thrones I did Game of Thrones directly led to me working with Mark Mylod, who directed a whole bunch of Game of Thrones, and then so he called me up to do an episode of Amazing Stories for the new Apple Plus streaming, which was also the situation where I got I got notified by Mark that Steven Spielberg himself really loved my storyboards, so that's exciting.
Oh
in its way. And then so leading from that into the Marvel stuff. I mean, obviously the Marvel stuff is a great sandbox and playground to be working in. And then the next one is I got to get myself a Star Wars, and then I'll be fine. I can retire.
Exactly. That's like the Triple Crown.
Pretty much,
yeah, exactly.
If I got to figure, hopefully, anyways, fingers crossed that if my storyboards are bouncing around the Marvel offices at some point, if somebody from Star Wars is looking for a storyboard artist, they might see my stuff. So I'm just saying.
Yeah. You've mentioned projects and people. Do you look forward to the interactions with certain directors like Scott or David, or is it like I just want to get into a Star Wars? I don't care who I'm working with. I want to get into a Star Wars.
Oh no, it's all about the people. I've gone into interview with directors for shows and walked out and subsequently been offered the job and turned it down because I didn't like the vibe or I didn't like the feeling that I got from the director. I'm not going to name names or anything.
No, obviously, yeah. Talk about the people you love, not the people you want to crap on.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, right.
That's
like
Sam Raimi, man. Jesus.
I'll be honest. I mean, yeah, I mean, working with Sam. I mean, I saw Evil Dead when I was way too young. You know, like way too young to have seen it. And it's been sort of one of the defining sort of movies of my life. And so to actually get a chance to work with the man after all of this time, and I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, you know, it's great. And through him, I get to meet all of these other fantastic creative people as well. So I mean, yeah, it's great. There are definitely projects that are better than others, but like some of them feel like work, and some of them feel like not so much work. And I've been lucky enough to really pick some good ones that don't feel too much like work, actually. So.
Well, it must be a kind of a shot in the arm then when the same directors kind of call on you repeatedly saying, "Let's work together again."
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes me feel like, you know, like I know, like, especially like in any kind of these creative fields, like imposter syndrome can be like a real thing where you just don't feel like you're living up to the job that you are claiming that you can do. But when, you know, I mean, I did 5 of the 6 episodes of Amazing Stories, and every one of those directors has called me back since. Director Chris Long, who did 1 episode of Amazing Stories, has called me for 3 other projects since. I mean, Rachel Talalay, for example. I mean, anytime she comes up with something that she knows I'm available, she'll try to get me in. So, you know, yeah. I mean, it really. I mean, I guess that's sort of a pat on my own back for being good at my job and for being personable myself. But I mean, it really does help to form those bonds and to really make those sort of good impressions. You know.
On the side, I know Norm is trying to prod you and me to work together on a project at some point.
Yeah, no, he's mentioned it, and I'm game as long as I'm available. I'd like to do it. I mean, yeah, we'll have to see what the schedule's like, but yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Off my palm with silver, of course. So I'm going to conclude this one with another question. It's kind of an odd one. So, because obviously I do research best I can. What's the deal with roller derby?
I love roller derby. I don't know what to tell you. It's I play competitive roller derby at an extremely high level. I'm a member of the Vancouver Murder,
which is a great name, by the way.
Thank you very much. That was long before I got here. Yeah. So the Vancouver Murder men's roller derby team. We are currently ranked number 4 in the world.
Right next to the Seattle Homicide.
No, who does? No, that's the Puget Sound Outcast is Seattle's team. But yeah, no, I can't remember who came in. Texas came in 3rd, I think. But yeah. So, anyways, this is something I've been doing for going on about 10 years now. And yeah, we moved out to Vancouver. It sort of upped the game a little bit. And my partner plays on the same team as us, and it's great. I mean, it's super fun. And I'm also on Team Canada, so it's kind of funny because. It's all a very, it's a big community, but it's also very small at the same time. So I mean, I'm on the Vancouver Murder with my partner Alex, and she is one of the coaches of Men's Team Canada, which I am on, and I am one of the coaches of Women's Team Canada, which she is on. So yeah, so it's like a roller derby power couple, I guess is what they sort of call us, but.
To sway any cliches, is it like people, you hear stories, I see it on movies, yeah, and then of course we see James Caan's interpretation from many decades ago.
Yeah.
Like,
so there's 2 different versions of it. There's bank track, which is where the track is on a bit of an angle, and everybody sort of, it's a little bit less. I don't want to say structured. There are rules and stuff like that, but it's really, that one's a little bit more like professional wrestling in that it's a little bit more spectacle. And then we do flat track roller derby, which is a little bit more accessible. It's actually done on a flat track. And we've taken the glitz and the glamour out of it a little bit. And it's really like, we've really sort of upped the athleticism of it. So like, we're athletes, we train like athletes, and it really has become a fantastic and like serious sport for those of us who take it really seriously. Like, So yeah, it's super good. At
Isn't there room
47
for
years,
a little bit of pompous? Can't you like go on the stage in a pompadour or something? You just
I mean, we still have fun with it, but once the game is started, it's all business all the time. So, but yeah, I mean, at 47 years old, I mean, I started playing just before I turned 40, and I'm literally in the best shape of my life. So, I mean, I love it so much. And I really, this whole pandemic thing has made it impossible for us to skate together. So I'm really this is my biggest problem with the social isolation and the quarantine and everything, is that my roller derby season just like got canceled before it even got started this year. So
yeah. Have you taken any big hits?
oh yeah, well, of course. I got this one guy came in, scooped me up, literally lifted me up off the ground and landed me like off the track. I've broken my ankle. I pulled the hamstring on my left leg during champs last year, the year before. It's crazy, yeah.
and you're still padded up too. It's almost like
Yeah, we
like
wear helmets and
football.
elbow pads and stuff. I mean, no shoulder pads. I could probably use some shoulder pads. My shoulders are a mess, but yeah. But I mean, yeah, we wear all the protective gear. So I mean, it takes a lot to actually injure yourself doing it. But
yeah, because I mean, I'm an artist and my wife's a bookkeeper, my fiance bookkeeper, and so we have this office. So I'm like, I'm an introvert. I never have to leave. And like being a comic book or a storyboard artist, this seems like a lot of work. But now suddenly you have this roller derby thing where like I can't go out.
yeah, that's like the biggest. I'll be honest. The biggest change in my life because of quarantining has been not playing roller derby. I mean, everything else. I mean, my second bedroom is a gym, so I'm still keeping active and working out and stuff like that. But just I mean, I miss my teammates. I miss actually playing my sport. I can go skate outside, but it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah,
nothing else in my life has changed that much. I'll be honest with you. I'm still sitting at this desk 10 hours a day, right? So
yeah. Well, I mean, exercise. God knows. I mean, I need to. I'm completely out of shape. So so you say your team was like number 1 in the world.
We're ranked number 4 right now.
Number 4 in the world. So that have you actually gone international roller derby competitions?
Yeah, I actually, because I was broken at the time, unfortunately, but my team went to champs in I think it was Wales 2 years ago, and next year I think it's supposed to be in Paris or something like that. So yeah, and then the World Cup is going to happen. It was supposed to happen in about a week actually.
Oh, there's a World Cup of roller derby.
Of roller derby, yeah. So last World Cup that happened, I believe, was in Barcelona, and then it's going to be in St. Louis next year. So yeah.
So,
yeah, we did travel around a lot. Yeah.
But I like the fact that it was in Barcelona. It's in St. Louis. You're like, can I just go to Barcelona?
I know, right? I had to miss the Barcelona one because my ankle was broken. But what are you gonna do, right?
But you said the next year is in Paris.
Yeah, the championships for the Men's Roller Derby Association, I think next year is in Europe somewhere. I think, but I don't think it's Paris actually. Now that I think.